Hello, boys and girls. TMA the Legends podcast. Personally, for me, this is one of the kind of players doesn't get any bigger for me. One of my childhood heroes. One I've been desperate to get on for a good while. Mr. David Holdsworth. Evening, sir, or afternoon, even.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Cheers. Thank you ever so much. Yeah, I just want to crack straight on. I know we were talking about leaders, and certainly you were a leader back then, no doubt about it. But I want to crack on with your career first, if you don't mind. Professionally with your brother, Dean as well, and you made your professional debut with the Hornets. But how did you get spotted? Because I mean, it wasn't just literally just walk straight into Watford. Were you playing youth football at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I go back and I mentioned a guy. You asked me about that. We were spotted playing in East London, and by a gentleman, a guy, a scout, Watford scout, and people may know of him and may recall of him, but a guy called Ken Brooks. I was playing for London and playing for Essex schools, and Ken came down to a place called Barkingside, just on the outskirts of East London there. And Ken used to take us over to training on a Tuesday and a Thursday night with Tom Wally over at the school there. And yeah, well, you know, at the time I was lucky enough to be asked by a few clubs at that time, but Watford was certainly the place that, you know, our hearts were set on.
Yeah, is there any particular thing that appealed to you, or was it just look, it's Watford coming? You know, you saw the setup, Tom Wally, people like that. You thought, oh my god, you know.
But the thing was, we were West Ham boys, and obviously coming from East London. And when West Ham offered us, I could be truthful, they offered us. We lived then on just a small place in Woodford, and I remember West Ham offering us a washing machine and a dish and a tumble dryer, and some other bits and bobs, but we weren't tempted. We loved the opportunity we got at Watford. I at the time was lucky enough to play for the England youth side, but you look into West Ham's first team. They had Billy Bonds and Alvin Martin, and you know, I didn't think that West Ham's creditability at the time was the fact that they were going to give loads of youngsters the chance, and it proved to be the best move we made because we chose Watford, and our hearts was, you know, it was a brilliant time.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that I've been pleasure speaking to, obviously, along with yourself, the Callies, the Blissetts, and people like that, and they always spoke very highly of Tom Wally, and he's like a reflection of Graham Taylor, but for the youth team. I mean, how important was Tom Wally in your career, especially at the start?
Well, if I'm being brutally honest, you know, we came from an inner London school, and I was always in trouble. But you know, that's a fact. And Graham and Tom, Steve Harrison, John Ward, vital people. But Tom really was the one that really. Sadly, our dad left us when we were young people, and you know, growing up with no father figure. Tom was like a father figure, but he certainly gave me the discipline that I needed, and he was bang on to do it. I have to be honest. There was many a time that I had a swift little look from Tom, or a little reminder that he was in charge, and it was a big leadership to me. It was huge. I was lucky enough to be the captain of Watford youth team, and then obviously go on further. But at that time, I needed that discipline inside me, and certainly had the leadership from Tom Wally, and an amazing character, an amazing man, and wonderful family, and it was like a family at that time.
So did you start as a centre half, or is it just something you transitioned? Because a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I started as a midfielder," and they sort of had an injury or two in the youth team, and I got dropped back, and I never looked back. Was that always the case?
I was always a centre half. I mean, I did play. I remember Steve Harrison put me on against Leicester to mark Gary McAllister and just said, "Kick him to bits," really, in a nice, pleasant way, of course.
Yeah.
I played right back a few times when I first started, because I think Gibbsy was out, or somebody wasn't getting a game. I remember played at Roker Park at right back, and no, I was always a centre half, and whether it being a 3 or a 2 at the time, it was always a traditional number 2, and you know, playing next to John McClelland was a privilege, and certainly me and him, you know, we had a great rapport together, and he was a wonderful person to play next to.
Yeah. I've heard many sort of. I'll tell you what. The funny thing with the washing machine thing, it's very Brian Clough, because I remember him signing Larry Lloyd with the promise of a washing machine for his missus, apparently. So that's definitely an old school bargaining tool. I have to say, absolutely brilliant hearing that. Yeah, well, another thing as well, I've heard, like, for, I say, the olden days, or I mean, I call that now as well, but especially, and I think this is brilliant, the way they did it is where, and I don't know if it happened at Watford, where the youth players, there's certain players that they know that maybe moving into the certain player's position would sit with that player. So like Johnny Mack, like you said, you played with Johnny Mack. Did they integrate you like that, so that you would come into the dressing room, get familiar with the players, sit next to certain players that, not saying directly replaced, but could be replaced, and they sort of took you under their wing?
Well, I think that the biggest part is making that progression from the youth team to the reserves, and then going into, obviously, the first team environment.
Mm.
I think when you look back at the youth team that we had a very successful youth team. You know, people, David James, my brother, Malcolm Allen, Timmy Sherwood, Ewan Roberts. I mean, we had a very good youth side, and some good players there. And if I've forgotten anybody, I'm sorry. But we were successful. But we had this blend in this belief given to us, though, by the hard training that we had. I mean, when we used to go into the ground every morning, you had to do your jobs, and I mean, it's different nowadays. Obviously, it's changed a hell of a lot, but that gave you the grounding for what you really needed, and that gave you the discipline. And you had to be on time. You weren't, if you were late, you were in banging trouble. And making that transition, you had some really good senior players in that dressing room. You look back to Jan Lohman, you look to Les Taylor, and even Brian Talbot. Blissett, John Barnes. Come on, I mean, David Bardsley was a very close friend of mine, and I was in digs with David. A great character. So I think that there was no way in them days that you could have a big divide in that dressing room. You'd have got sorted out, and you'd have got told what you had to do. And I don't think that was wrong. I think that was a really good thing, and it was a privilege to be around.
I think that's something that's lost on today's
Different
players. It's different culture as well. You're absolutely right. I think it's, they say you can't say it's a man's sport or anything like that, but you were taught discipline, certain way of playing. Like I said, the transition was a bit more smoother as well. You knew your role.
Yeah, I remember going to Bristol Rovers and with Westy up front, and I can't remember who I was playing with at the back. It might have been Big Steve Terry, and one of their centre forwards, and I still remember him because I found him a few years later. He broke my nose, and I was only 16, and he caught me with a right treat of an elbow in my nose. And I remember John Ward saying to me, "Well, this is the big boys' league now. You're welcome to the man's world." But I think the first tackle went around about the bloke's neck height. So, you had to make that transition, but also you had to handle yourself, and you had to be able to look after yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, exactly. I remember a certain incident at Norwich away back in 1990 with Raw Fox.
Yeah,
that was. But look, something like that. I totally agree. I mean, you got to look after yourself. Was that the tipping point where you sort of said, "Hang on a moment"? Like you said, it's a big boys' league now. You got to stand up for yourself. Was that the tipping point where you think, "Hang on, I've got to really sort of show myself up now, make myself bigger"?
Yeah, we had to. You had to stand up for yourself. There was no place to hide. And going back to Foxy, he was a friend of mine. He still is. And I mean, we were a bit committed, and probably a little bit too committed in that bit. But look, you had to have a play with passion. And coming through the youth team, I can still remember Tom on the sideline. Come on, he was, he really wanted us to win. But there was a reason that Watford always did well in the South East Counties League and the football combination. It's because we had the privilege of working with top coaches and people that gave you that ability to find a way of winning, and that was a good grounding. We used to love going to Tottenham and to Arsenal's and going upset a few people over London Coney or at Cheshunt during the youth team, and they were good days, really good days.
Exactly. Did you win the 1985 Youth Cup as well?
We didn't. We got beat in the final.
That's it, Newcastle.
We. And again, I remember that because Tom said to me, "There's a boy in midfield there called Gascoigne. Make sure he doesn't get a kick." So we went up to Newcastle, and I think it was the first time I'd actually gone that far in the country, to be honest. And a Mark Gazza, and it was a, he was a top quality player. We drew 0-0, and I can't remember. There was a big crowd though, and then we had to make a couple of changes in the home game. But to be fair, they were a year, maybe 16 months ahead of us in terms of physicality, and they won the final, and deservedly so. But it was it was an unbelievable occasion for Watford to get to the FA Youth Cup final. It was amazing. We had some good players as well.
Oh, I mean, you reeled off some there, and it's like I'm just listening, going, Jesus Christ, you didn't have too much of a shabby youth side, but that's the thing. You can reel them off now. I mean, we're fortunate in today's youth team. We've got 3 or 4 players that we're very fortunate we can reel off, because we haven't had that for a good while, and that conveyor belt that we've been begging for, we had that for years. I remember that even when I was a teenager and watching you guys under Perryman and Rhoda, we always had that conveyor belt. We were always relied on that youth team element coming through. But obviously I want to touch on as much as Watford as I can, if you don't mind, Dave. But Dean, it was a shame Dean left as well, because I mean I always put him up as a really good. I mean, look what he achieved. I mean, you had a brilliant career in yourself anyway, but I mean, Dean really kicked on.
Well, Dean,
what he did.
If you look back there, and some supporters perhaps won't know what how that happened. We had I think the manager at the time, Steve, and the team had an abundance of strikers. You had Malcolm Allen, you had Ewan Roberts, you had Walsh Sterling, and I think Dean was probably, and then you had another young boy that didn't go on to make it. That was a guy called Libert Henry, who was in the reserves with my brother. But my brother had to go out, and I was fortunate enough to break into the first team. But Dean had to go out and earn his stripes, and he went to. I remember Clive Middlemass rang me and said, "Would I come up to Carlisle with Dean?" And I was like, "Where's Carlisle?" But obviously, I know where that is now. But at the time, they wanted to give, they wanted Dino to go there. And listen, Dean went to, I think he went to Swansea. I think he went to 4 or 5 clubs. Scored goals, and Dean was desperate, because obviously his twin brothers breaking into the first team. Dean was desperate to go and earn that chance, and he proved the best thing he ever did, because it was for him an opportunity to go and express himself. And Brentford got the fruits of his goals, didn't they? He did fantastically well there, and it gave him the block to move on to.
I mean, you both had stellar careers, solid careers in itself. Especially, I like to say, more fondly watching you at Watford being captain, Hesse straight after you as well. But one of my memories of you are definitely the goal against Scarborough. I think the Oldham one was a decent one as well, as half decent as what I remember. Away, I remember that just before the Luton game, so we won't go there after that one, sadly. But how many times did you actually play against Dean? Because I remember my fondest memory was when the FA Cup '96 at home, when we did the dying fly when Mooney scored that cracker. But they always told you, and I heard from a couple of players that they told you to man mark. Not obvious thing, man mark your brother. And I saw the battle you guys were having. It was absolutely brilliant. It's the main memory of that game.
Well,
if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember it like yesterday, to be honest, because on the previous Saturday night, when the draw was made, Dean and I on the phone together, and we were watching the big match, or match of the day, when the draw was made. And as it went down one by one, we went, hold on a minute, we know what's coming. And not many people remember there were the last 2 balls that were drawn out.
Really?
So the lead up was very difficult, because our mother certainly didn't want me to kick him, and that was always never going to be the case. But you're playing against obviously a Premier League team. We were the underdogs, of course we were, and obviously my brothers flying in with the first team, and they were a good side and very tough team to play against. It was pressure, you're marking your twin brother in on match of the day, and obviously you're doing your best to. My problem was I didn't want to lose the game. As my brother scored, it wasn't really a problem to me. I didn't want to lose the game. I'm captain of Watford, and I wanted us to get through. So when we scored and the lads dived on the floor, I was unaware about that, I have to be honest. And there was me and Colin Foster going, "What are they doing?" And it was quite funny. But no, the return leg was a great game, and we lost. I think it was on extra time. Yeah. No, playing against my brother was always, listen, he's a fantastic player. when I went to Birmingham, I scored the opening goal on Sky header, and I've got a picture of my brother's face. He's holding his head in his hand, but fortuitously for him, Graham Hyde, who handed the ball on the goal line at the end, and Dino scored the penalty. So I think it was 3-3, and we played against each other a few times, and it was always a good battle.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't you both signed this for Bolton as well, didn't you? I've seen a picture of both of you doing like a promo sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it was again. I'd come out of Birmingham, and Dean said Big Sam wants you to come over and help us. So, you know what? After spending sort of 14, 15 years apart, it was amazing to go and spend sort of 4 or 5 months. I was only going there to help him because there was something else in the pipeline, and they'd just signed Ivan Campo, so I only went there to cover really. But it was great to share an apartment with my brother up in Bolton for a few months, and it was a great experience. You know, playing with Jock IF and JJ Okocha. I mean, some proper players, and they had a very good squad. So it was a privilege to go there, I must say.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, before we went on record and started this, I was saying about asking you, and this is more of a fanboy thing for me, but what really went wrong, what was so right mid-90s that went so wrong in 95, 96, because really Glenn got such a really solid unit there. We got a club record, was it 12 clean sheets as well?
Yeah.
Colin Foster, Millen, yourself. I mean, we had some proper centre backs back then. I mean, I'll kill for some of them now. I mean, we've got a couple of decent ones signed now, but leaders all over the pitch. You had the Hesses, Payne, yourself, obviously, Miller, you know, all these type of players, real leaders. But what do you think really went wrong the following season that sort of curtailed that?
I think there's a lot of things that you can say why things went wrong there, and you know, it's a long time ago now, and obviously I can reflect. We did have that. I mean, we kept. I think it was 11 or 12 clean sheets on the trot, which was an amazing aspect. I think when Glenn decided to leave, and obviously there was other situations in the boardroom perhaps that weren't conducive to making it stable, and that's always the hardest thing when you've got a club that has too many changes. To have that continuity, you know, you wanted Watford to grow and then really break into the next level, and sadly, it wasn't able to do so.
Yeah, I mean it's a sad ending to a lot of people's careers at Watford. And like I said, for me personally, being 12, 13 at the time, was one of my favourite ever teams. Wasn't like I've already said to you, it wasn't one of the best Watford teams, but certainly one of my favourite all-time teams. Some of my favourite players, which I'm like say with meeting you today and meeting a few others, I'm really privileged to have had that. You know, to meet you. But yeah, we've obviously you left Watford for a new challenge. For Sheffield United. How did that come about?
Well, I've been, again, to go back to times when you think about, you know, when you reflect on it. I mean, I spent over 15 years at Watford, and you know, opportunities for me to leave, and that was pre-Bosman time, so you just couldn't get up and go. And I know that the club had turned down a few offers for me, and I'd spoken to a few people during that time. But I was very loyal, and I wanted to be loyal. And making all them appearances for Watford, captaining the club from schoolboy through to the first team, was an absolute privilege. You know, it was a great place to play, but I didn't particularly. How can I put it? At the time, I was aware of Sheffield United's interest in me. The club was going through a time where they needed the money, and they got a handsome fee for me at the time. And really, one of the biggest attractions to going up to Sheffield United and was Howard Kendall. The man was a genius and an incredible man, and I still like him. You know, when you think about, I'd love to see Graham Taylor and Howard Kendall sitting in heaven right now, and you know, having a chat about tactics, because two incredible people. And big people in my life. Howard was a fantastic man manager, and he made me captain after a couple of weeks there. And again, pulling on the Watford shirt, but also pulling the Blade shirt on, and being a captain of a good club with very, very straightforward and honest supporters was always a privilege. So I was very fortunate.
I'll bet. And I mean, I've seen a lot of the Sheffield United side back then. Peter Cachiro, a lot of other players play for a really, really solid side. And I mean, my father-in-law's an Evertonian, and Howard Kendall They absolutely God worship him, mate. A bit like us with GT.
Yes,
He's absolutely amazing, mate. So you've really been fortunate. I mean, I know you know this anyway, but I mean, from one fantastic manager to another, and some really solid players. But what was it an easy decision leaving Watford? I mean, you said you had
no,
14
no.
great 14, 15 years to leave.
I
Yeah.
I think the club needed the money, and at the time the opportunity came about, there was a lot of changes again, and I'd sort of been there a long, long time. For me, it had been a privilege to play at Watford, and always coming back to Watford. Even playing against him was quite difficult for me, and I, had so many fantastic memories playing with people, but also characters off the pitch as well. I stayed and lived when I was an apprentice there with Cliff Vassiliou, and Cliff the Greek, who was just an incredible character. Sadly, he passed away, and very upsetting. An incredible man, and his family, his sons, and his all of his family were wonderful to me. And there was a lot of people in Watford where you grow up because you become part of that family. So it wasn't easy, and as I said, I'd stayed a long, long time, and I the opportunity to go up to Yorkshire came about, and but playing for Howard was the biggest thing, really. And then I was lucky enough to play with Ian Rush. I played with Nigel Spackman. I played with Paul McGrath, and amongst the Peter Couture, who's a great character.
Yeah. I mean, Paul McGrath, I mean, Jesus, he's one of the best, finest centre backs. I mean, a lot of players that have played with him said he's one of the best centre backs they've ever played with.
Well, the thing is that he came, and his days were, I would say, limited because of his injuries, etc. And he played in the middle. There was Carl Tyler on the left and me on the right. We had some good performances. I mean, some great players, Dean Saunders, they came, Jan Fjotov, and yeah, it was. I was very privileged to captain Sheffield United and play with some of those players. But going to the key of it was the attraction was Howard Kendall, and an incredible man. Him, Viv Busby, John Bailey, and Spackers, brilliant people.
Yeah, you got to the playoffs as well, I believe, in your first season, was it?
We did, and we lost in the last moment. And I can still remember the goal, the boy curling the ball on. It made his career, but. Incredible day at Wembley. Leading the team out was an absolute honour, as always. And I can still remember Howard saying something private to me, which I'll keep to myself. But he was an incredible man management. And even after the game, when we had a few glasses of wine and we look back, the sad thing was for us is that he told me after the game that he was going back to Everton, which was hard to take. But again, as captain of Sheffield United at the time, I was very privileged.
Exactly. No, I think heaven's a richer place with certainly those two or three legends up there. Absolutely. 1999, around that sort of time, Birmingham came calling. What appealed to you going to Birmingham? Was it once again, fresh challenge, another
the thing is, the club Sheffield United at the time was having a very leadership from the chairman there, and there was a lot of disgruntled people in the boardroom. Steve came in as manager, and they obviously had to make. I think they sold 5 of us in a week. I think there was Graham Stewart, there was myself, Brian Dean, Dean Saunders left. I think Don Hutchinson left. And then Trevor Francis came in for me, and I went to speak to Trevor. It wasn't that I didn't want to go. I loved the club at Blades, but Trevor is an amazing man. And so meeting him, but knowing the club were going to sell everybody, it wasn't really that big a decision to make, because you want to go to pick the club that's going to go and Birmingham hadn't made the playoffs for the previous 4 or 5 years, so Trevor was under quite a lot of pressure. To sign me. They lost Gary Ablett. He got an injury, and he came in for me, and I had a discussion with him. And yeah, playing for Trevor Francis was another absolute honour. And obviously Birmingham City, another big club, and we made the playoffs.
Exactly. Your time I mean, I haven't really looked. I always followed you on the Sheffield United route after you left, and a lot of people did. And I know a few nice little receptions when we went, especially when we went away to see. I mean, more out of respect, but you're going to get stick from your ex club, even though we love our players. You're going to get a little bit of that, but. Your time at Birmingham, how do you look upon that? I mean, you always look. I mean, from what I see, is you've never really had a bad spell at any club, and you've always looked fondly in every single club you've been at.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate it. I listen. I was captain of Birmingham as well, so I went on to enjoy that option, and being given that was a privilege as well, because I was playing with some very good players there. I mean, Andrew Johnson, Martin O'Connor, a lot of good players. Peter and Love, Paul Furlong, who we all know very well. Going to Birmingham was good. I went there. Steve Bruce and I didn't really see eye to eye at that time. And when I left Sheffield United, he was the manager. And then when Trevor sadly got the sack, I knew the next person coming through the front door might not, me and him might not get on. Steve was the next manager of Birmingham after that. So he had his own ideas, and we had a few good, interesting discussions, if you like. But that's football for you, and we got on after that, no problem whatsoever. But as I say, I look back, I think I played over 100 games for Birmingham, and I really enjoyed playing at St Andrews. Loved them. The supporters were very, very passionate people, like the Blades fans, and certainly like Watford fans. Want their club to do well. No, it was a privilege to play for Birmingham, and I played with some very good players as well. So it was lucky.
I bet you must keep in touch with a hell of a lot of your ex-teammates, a matter of not hundreds of clubs. You played for some really, really decent clubs here. I bet you keep in touch with a lot of them.
I always, going back to clubs and even coming back to Watford, and I came back to Watford in the summer to the Elton John concert. That was a brilliant thing. Met all the guys, Luther and Paul Franklin, and some really lovely chaps who I hadn't seen for a long time. So that was always nice. Coming back to Watford was sad for me. One of the recent times when I laid a wreath on the pitch for Glenn Roeder, and Glenn was, I think, amazing character, Glenn. I shared a room with him for I think about 2 years, and when we shared a car, Glenn was horse racing mad, and we always used to have to stop at a bookies on the way home to find out if his best horse had won or something like that. And so some fond memories of great people, and seeing Gary Porter, and just great memories for me.
Yeah, like you said, and then I've always said, the mid-90s team, I loved it. The football, some of the time, the football we played was absolutely brilliant. It just unravelled itself near the end with injuries and, like you said, changes at the club. All went for the better eventually, but it's just sad then. But Roeder, God rest his soul, another legend.
When Glenn came to Watford, we'd played. You might recall this yourself. We played, I think, Newcastle 4 times. In the FA Cup, and every time I had to mark a bloke called Mirandinha, who was like one of the first Brazilians to come over. So that was a good tussle, and I can still remember it. And he was a lively little character. And then after Glenn scored that goal, he scored the own goal that took us through. I don't know if you might remember that, but and then 2 weeks later, Tom Wally says to me, the master's coming in Tom's unique way, and it was Glenn. And again, he picked. We lived not too far apart on the outskirts of London, and me and Glenn used to share a car every day.
You did. People don't realise how good a player actually Glenn was, and he certainly. He was badly missed in 1990-91 when we got injured, because I mean you had a bad injury that season as well, and the club just managed to stay up. I mean we were in the wilderness for a long time, but we had that glimmer of light in the mid-90s when we finished 7th.
That's right.
It could have really got kicked on from them, which is a shame, because like I said, we had a solid base there and a lot of leaders there, something that teams cry out for nowadays.
Well, really. I think that's leadership. It comes from within, and you have to have that from your manager, your coaches, and certainly everybody has to pull their way. And I think when you've got an abundance of them, you only have to look at the top teams in every division. They've generally got a very good rapport, and certainly you've only got to look at England last night, to be honest. One of the first things I noticed last night was when Harry Kane scored that goal, every player was around him, and it showed that unity on the pitch, and I'm sure that spreads off the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like to touch on, just obviously before we shut this down, I've got a few quick fire ones, which are literally just one word ones as well. But just talking about what you're currently doing. I mean, you managed host the clubs as well, notably Gretna. How did that come about?
Well, it was really quite weird. I was offered a chance to go and play for, it was Nottingham Forest, and my brother with Wimbledon. And I got a phone call completely out of the blue from a gentleman called Brooks Marlson, and I was living out in near Wolverham Abbey, and this chap rings me and he said, "I'm Mr. Holdsworth. I would like you to build me a football club." So I thought, you know, as you do, I'm thinking, where's Jeremy Beadle? My brother set me up. And I went to meet him at the Marriott Hotel at Waltham Abbey. Anyway, this little chap walks in with a beard and he was smoking, as he did at the time. And we sat down and he said, "I want you to build me a football. I'm buying Gretna Football Club." And the first thing I said was, "Where's Gretna?" So we had a laugh, and he was it was a Mackham Brooks. He was from Bennymore, and incredible character. And he said, "Look, I want you to show me how to build a football club." And I know who gave him. It was another chairman gave him my name, so I was very privileged and honoured to be given that opportunity. He asked me. I sat down and wrote about an 8 to 10 page dossier on what a football club should be. It was a part-time football club, so my first responsibility was there, but also it's not around the corner. So I ended up doing 3 flights a week from Stansted to Newcastle, and playing on a Saturday and then going home. And then I did all the contracts for him for a part-time club to a full-time club. So I mean, Gretna's a small place. The club was it still is. I've actually been up there recently. Yeah. And he wanted to take this club. His first club was Carlisle, because he had this amazing. He loved Carlisle for whatever reason, and that was fine. But he couldn't buy Carlisle because they had an owner at the time who didn't want to sell it to Brooks. They didn't get on. So we ended up buying Gretna, and we took it from the Scottish third, second, first to the Premier League, and we got to the Scottish Cup final. It was an incredible journey. I don't think that'll ever be done again unless it'd be a freak. But that was an incredible time for me. But it was important for me to learn about a football club, doing everything behind the scenes. But I was living in London, and then I moved. Brooks and I got on fabulously well, and he's still he's still up. Another one in heaven who I'd love to have a chat with. One day we will. But he was my little boy's godfather, and his family, and lovely people. Sadly, he passed away a few years back, and there were great memories. I mean, what a journey it was. I mean, I remember when we won the Scottish second division, and he came out of the, I think it was Hampden Park. We played Queen's Park, and he had tears on my shoulder. I mean, you don't find that type of man very often. And he just said, "David, I've had a great time. Can we go again?" And I ended up staying there and moved up to Cumbria. Great part of the world, and had a great relationship with him. He was so close. We were very, very close people, and I've been very fortunate to meet some lovely people like that.
Exactly, and a lot of people, it got a lot of coverage, and a lot of people, including myself, were following Gretna, and it was one of those fairy tale stories. It's like a club out of nowhere, just not coming into a little bit of money, but someone who with a dream, trying to live it, really, wasn't it?
It's an incredible story, and as I say, when the further we went on, the more Brooks enjoyed himself, him and his lovely son Craig and family. The journey was incredible because we became everybody's second team. I ran the reserves as well up there, and obviously it was bringing good youngsters through. There were some really good boys that we got on our radar, and we brought on up to Gretna. I mean, Kenny Duca was a doctor before he played for Gretna, and everybody knew Kenny Duca, and David Bingham and people like and Andy Smith, good characters. And the journey was unprecedented, if you like, because no one else had ever done that. But the biggest person it was because of Brooks Milson, not anybody else. We all worked very hard because he was such a lovely person and a man. But also the journey was, I don't think anybody else will do it, but you never know. But right now it stands alone because of Brooks Milson, not anybody else.
Exactly. I did a lot of people. I mean, we know you as one hell of a legend at Watford, and what you did for us was absolutely amazing. We always thank you for that. But it certainly put you on the map for people who didn't know who you were, which I couldn't believe. I had to explain to people, this is the guy who was centre back for Watford. It's absolutely amazing. He played for Watford, but it was great. But it must have been great for you as well.
Oh, bless you. That's very kind. I look back at Watford, and it was an incredible journey. And I mean, when I was the funny thing was I was actually going to be sold, and before I smashed my knee in, I mean, Stevie P, I think the club were they'd spoken to Leeds and Howard Kendall. And I'll tell you the reason why about Howard again. And there was at Manchester City, I believe. So they said to me, "Look, this is your last game." And I think there was only 1 or 2 subs at the time. 10 minutes into that match, I was in hospital. I was right over the road there in the hospital with a cruciate ligament injury, and nowadays you would never play, would you? You would never play, and the club would have sold you and told you not to play because you're getting sold for £1 million or whatever it was, and there was a lot of money to the club. I say I spent 13 months out that year, and it was tough getting over that injury, the cruciate injury and lateral injury. But I still remember the first game back. I was at Plymouth away, and I got man of the match, and we drew 0-0, I think it was. And my memories are amazing about Watford. So many of them, and as I say, I was lucky enough to play and be guided by lots of lovely people and great characters. But the team itself, as I say, the club went through a transition after Harry Bassett came, after after Graham, and that was a transition that was probably too much at the time if you look back at it. And as I say, you stay a long time, and I did. I always wanted to play 250 games for Watford, so I managed to do that, and it was an honour. As I say, pulling on that shirt, I can still see all them shirts in the background there, and there's some great memories. The Iveco one. And there was a lot of good players that came to Watford. You remember Kevin Phillips and good Bruce Dyers and people like that. Great characters.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, that I've got a couple of purple ones. That purple one's blank, but the other one's got Holdsworth and 5 on it. So I thought I'd tell you that. The other one's got Rambo and 6 and 11 and Phillips. So one or two favourites. Right, just before we go, and like I said, Dave, thank you ever so much. We've gone over the much you agree. So absolutely amazing. I couldn't thank you enough. Definitely one of the legends I've ticked off that I really, really wanted to interview. So thank you very much. Just a couple of quick fire, if that's all right. Best team you faced?
Best team. I'm going to go Tottenham with Klinsmann in it.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Klinsmann, but so best player you played with?
Oh dear, that's a really tough one. Played with
Yep.
Glenn Roeder.
Yeah. I've already done the best player played against. Yeah, Klinsmann, and I've seen in other interviews he said Klinsmann. I won't mention the 6. I won't mention the 6-3 at Frick, which was hard, wasn't it?
I don't mind, because I remember Perry Digweed digging the ball out after he scored his header at the far post, and I thought he can't score, and he ended up putting it in the other far post, and Perry was going to clap it. But the return game, we went to White Hart Lane and we won. Do you remember?
Yes, and I was actually there that one, and we should have. We had as many chances. I think I agree with Roder. We had as many chances to beat them 6-2, 6-3 as well at one stage. Yeah, I remember Nogan sort of like chesting it in from the last goal. Brilliant. Best manager and coach. I know this is probably got a really hard one because you've had some fantastic coaches you've worked with.
Best manager. How can you split Graham Taylor and Howard Kendall?
Yeah.
That's an impossible task for me because of my personal relationship with them. I think coaches. Tom Wally. Come on, Tom Wally's a legend and amazing man.
Exactly. I'm so fortunate I've met him. Well, bumped into him by mistake. My mate tapped me on my back and he was behind me. So I'll never forget that. Absolutely brilliant. Best ground, finally, best ground and why? Probably an obvious one, but
that's a tough one. I mean, I've got a soft spot obviously for Vicarage Road, soft spot for Bramwell Lane. I think leading the team out at Wembley for Sheffield United was an incredible honour. It was more about Wembley. My son was there. I have to go Wembley. I can't go beyond that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Dave. Absolute honour and a privilege. And you're always welcome. Obviously, you'll always be welcome at the Vic, and you get an absolute amazing reception. Not the excitement that we used to give you at St Andrews and Bramwell when we saw you, but certainly a much better one than that when you turn up once again. But I look forward to meeting you at the Vic.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.